Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming and listening today to another installment of Civil Defense. These are a series of nighttime programs that I am putting together to remind people that nuclear weapons do exist, that if they exist, there may be indeed an intent to use them, and there may be the possibility that they will be used, in which case, if we become victims of a nuclear attack but survive it, we should know what to do, how we can preserve our lives after the attack, and how we can stitch society back together again. These are real concerns that I think most of us should deal with. And so every evening I've been doing some readings having to do with a nuclear explosion or with nuclear war or the politics that could trigger nuclear war, different issues like that. Interestingly, a couple of days ago, let's see, this would have been on Tuesday, uh, this article appeared, What It's Like to Witness a Nuclear Explosion. And it gives this gentleman's, uh, I guess, autobiographical description of a nuclear bomb that he witnessed. And I felt it was very interesting just for the fact that it appeared in the newspaper, and it shows the ongoing concern with the possibility of a nuclear exchange between two nuclear armed nations. Uh, this gentleman, I think he witnessed the explosion of a several megaton bomb, and it was very powerful, and it did affect him deeply. He was apparently burned by it somewhat, not permanently or anything, but he could feel the heat wave definitely. And it says here, uh, as the rising clouds started to form a mushroom cap, I waited for the shock wave to arrive. In the distance, I could see a long vertical shadow approaching. I instinctively opened my mouth and moved my jaw from side to side to equalize the pressure across my eardrums, closed my eyes, and put my hands over my ears. Pow! It hit me like a full body slap, knocking me back. I opened my eyes to see another shadow approaching from a slightly different direction. Over the next few seconds, I felt several smaller blows created by the reflections of the pressure wave off distant islands. And he goes into a pretty good detailed description of what happens, and you would see many parallels between what we have studied here and what he experienced. Here it says here, the heat. Um, Another passage. As I watched from 20 miles away, all the material in the bomb barge and surrounding lagoon water and air had been vaporized and reached a temperature of tens of millions of degrees. Of course, he wasn't measuring it himself, but these are estimates that were probably provided to him. As the x-rays, and he basically just, gives a description of a nuclear explosion as we have gone over ourselves. The outer high-pressure shock region cooled and lost its capacity as it raced toward me, and a hotter inner fireball again appeared. This point in the process is called breakaway, occurring about 3 seconds after detonation, when the fireball radius was already nearly 5,500 feet. So we're talking about a mile radius of the fireball, which is quite a big fireball. Um, the heat was becoming unbearable. Bare spots at my ankles were starting to hurt. The aluminum foil hood I had fashioned for protection was beginning to fail. I thought that the hair on the back of my head might catch on fire. So he could feel that kind of heat wave coming. This is Rod Bunsen, by the way, is the author of this article. What I find interesting is that we finally get the kind of political drift of his viewpoint. He says, if nuclear weapons are used in Ukraine, let me read that over again. If nuclear weapons are used in Ukraine, the biggest worry is that the conflict could spin quickly out of control. I don't sense that Russia is going to be using nuclear weapons in Ukraine. If Russia uses nuclear weapons, it's because of an existential threat, and then we'll feel them here in America and throughout Europe. It's not something that's going to happen in Ukraine. So this is some kind of other narrative being spun and infiltrated into this article. But he does end, he says, having witnessed one thermonuclear explosion, I hope that no humans ever have to witness another. Which is a good sentiment, a wise sentiment. So we see that there is this concern out there that there could be nuclear war, and we all hope it doesn't happen, but let's prepare for the worst. Let's be prepared. I want to continue reading from the book, The Effects of the Atomic Bomb, written in 1950 in a revised version, issued by the U.S. government in conjunction with the Los Alamos labs. Okay, we have been actually reading about the physical effects on the human body of the atomic bomb, especially of radiation, and so we'll continue with that. Atomic bomb cataracts. Because of the discovery of cataracts in a number of cyclotron workers about 3 years or so after exposure to excessive amounts of radiation, probably neutrons, the Atomic Bomb Casualty Commission has made a detailed study of the incidence of cataracts among the survivors of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. By early 1950, 45 cases of cataracts had been identified in persons who were within 3,300 feet from ground zero at the time of the respective explosions. The cataracts are similar to those which have been previously associated with overexposure to X-rays or gamma rays, and hence they are probably due to the initial radiation from the atomic bombs. Whether these were gamma rays or neutrons, it is impossible to state, but the high biological effectiveness of the latter suggests that they were at least a contributory factor, the neutrons, that is. More persons in the same zone with respect to the center of the explosion died either from thermal or mechanical injuries or from radiation sickness. All the survivors who developed cataracts must have been exposed to considerable intensities of radiation, as is evidenced by the complete transient epilation in all cases and the development of symptoms of radiation sickness in several of them. There's little doubt that Were it not for fortuitous shielding, the persons under consideration would have succumbed to the sickness soon after the atomic explosions. I don't quite get all of that, but there it is. Uh, we have a section on, tell you what's coming up, a section on residual radiation hazards. I'll read a little bit of that and then we'll end. Introduction. In an atomic explosion, the radiation sickness discussed in the preceding sections would be almost exclusively the result of the initial nuclear radiations, particularly the gamma rays described in Chapter 7. The possible biological effects of the radioactive contamination, in other words, fission products and plutonium or uranium, which is responsible for the residual radiations, will now be considered. It should be emphasized at the outset that a radiological hazard due to these radiations is likely to arise in special circumstances only. In the case of a high or moderately high airburst, the danger will be essentially non-existent. There was no evidence after the atomic explosions in Japan that any radiation injury or sickness resulted from the fission products or the bomb material. However, an underground burst or an underwater burst accompanied by a base surge could lead to contamination of inhabited areas, in which case the hazard due to residual radiations might be significant. A similar situation could arise if a radioactive material were used as a radiological warfare weapon. In general, contaminated areas would be rapidly evacuated by the inhabitants before the effects of the radiation were appreciable, although this might not be possible for those responsible for the measurement of radioactivity and for carrying out decontamination procedures. Although the residual radiation hazard following an atomic explosion is thus not likely to be serious except in special cases, the subject will be considered here for the sake of completeness. In this connection, it is convenient to distinguish between A, external radiation, and B, internal radiation. The former applies to instances where the source of radiation lies outside the body, and the latter refers to cases in which the source is taken into the body by ingestion, inhalation, or through breaks in the skin. So we'll continue. So we're talking about residual radiation hazards, which they say are not nearly as serious as the initial radiations emitted by the bomb, but for the sake of completeness, they're going to review even this issue. And I think that will be important for us because we're always frightened about residual radiations and want to know what are our chances of becoming ill as a result of them. So we will look into that in tomorrow's episode. I thank you for coming tonight. My name is Peter Devine. The name of this series is called Civil Defense. And we will see you tomorrow if you have time to stop by and listen. Thank you very much.